Hi everybody, welcome back to OC Aviary, where it is now 6 weeks away until we pair up the birds at the beginning of April for, of course, the breeding season. So in this episode, we're going to be taking a look round at all my different species. We've got all the native birds, the canaries and the mule and hybrid pairs, and looking how I'm going to condition them in preparation for the upcoming breeding season. So the first thing is cleaning everything out. So I've given everything a really big deep clean. Now, of course, that's general husbandry anyway. You need to make sure that your birds have always got clean cages and everything like that. But particularly right now when we start conditioning, I do a really big deep clean, which involves taking cages out, jet washing them down. I've been stripping back the whole of the flight cages. We've been disinfecting those with some Clean and Clear Checkmite and some veterinary F10 disinfectant. And it's just made the whole environment in here a hell of a lot more cleaner. Any mite that may have been lingering between cages or crevices have of course been removed, and it's just made it a hell of a lot more nicer in here for the birds. And that's of course the flight cages and the UPVC cages as well. And I've also disinfected the floors, the sink, everything. So everything is lovely and clean in here now. To keep it easy to clean and make sure I can maintain that cleanliness in here, I've put wood chips on the floor of the flights, so it's very easy to just get a scraper, scrape them out into a dustpan and brush and into a bag. And in the cages, I've put newspaper on the floors to protect the overall drawers. And then I've put some easy bed, so some wood chips on top of that, and that just helps soak up any moisture so things don't go mouldy. Ventilation is of course very important because it's going to maintain a good air quality in the bird room, and that's very good for the birds, of course, getting them into condition, making it much more fresher in here, reducing any chances of any respiratory diseases occurring in any of them. But it also protects myself. Of course, as bird keepers, we're often in our bird rooms doing different things, whether it be cleaning out and looking at our birds. So when I am cleaning out, I do wear a surgical mask just to protect myself, so when it is dusty, it does reduce the chances or the amount that I breathe in particularly. I've got all the windows open with the safety measures, so we've got a nice, fresh and clean environment in here with good air quality to protect the birds and myself. The next thing I need to make sure is taken care of course, is fitness. Now, the birds' fertility will massively increase when they're fit and not overweight, and we need to make sure that is catered for. So, since doing all the clean outs, I've had a big move about. So a lot of the birds, particularly the show birds, have all moved into the flight cages. So we've now got my red pollcocks in one of the 6 foot long flight cages. We've got 4 greeny cocks in here. They're sort of what I would class as my exceptional birds in my stud. So they're going to be our breeders for this season. Those 4 are in there getting fit, and I've got the canary cocks down here. We've only got North Dutch frills now as sort of a general straight breeders of canaries. I have moved on the majority of the feeders. So we've got a good number of birds in here. They're all getting fit and they're looking a lot better at the moment. And then of course we've moved a lot of the birds, particularly the hens, into these cages. So these are 6 feet long flight cages, or breeding cages if you want to call them, and they have all been disinfected. We've took out all the dividers, and we've generally got 3 or 4 birds to a cage. So I've put my 5 greeny hens that we're going with for this season that I'm going to class as my exceptional birds again. They're our breeders. We've got Siberian bully hen, we've got our Sibo goldies and our Sibo bully cockbird. We've got our Crossbill mule pair. They've got a 6 foot long flight cage. And as you can tell, there's perches everywhere because she throws them about and undoes them. So I've got a mix of wooden and plastic perches in there for her to chew. We've got our canary hens as well. And I've put the mules and hybrids on the bottom row, as obviously they aren't any use to us in a breeding perspective. To get them into top fitness then, it is a gradual process. So the first thing I would say is I'm not dropping the weight off all these birds immediately. It's still February. Literally last week we had snow on the floor on the roof of the bird room and it was -2. And if I did knock all the weight off the birds initially, they'd have no energy stores and no insulation and would struggle in the cold. So it is a gradual process. But what I've done is I've put a perch either end of the cage. So that's about a 5 foot difference between the perches so they can fly end to end to get fit. And then in these cages, we've got our red poll hens and our Goldie red poll hybrid pair. There's a perch either end, so there's about a 7-foot difference in those, and they fly either end. And there's only a couple of birds to a cage, so they're really happy in there. They're quite sociable birds and species anyway, so they're not bothered by other birds being in there with them, and they're certainly enjoying that. Now, something that I've found does help get the birds fit, and also you can kind of judge the condition, is actually offering them enrichment. Now remember, these aren't intelligent species like a parrot that needs regular enrichment, otherwise it will show obvious signs of stress. But still, with these birds, they do need things to do. So the first thing is I do put newspaper in there for them, and they absolutely love shredding that. So that is half the time my clean outs, as the cage isn't dirty, they've just shredded all the newspaper, it needs replenishing. But also with species like the red polls particularly, and the acrobatic species, I do offer a couple of millet sprays, and they absolutely love messing about with that, hanging it from the roof of the cage or the aviary, and they'll spend hours climbing about on that, getting food, and they're working for the food as well. And that certainly does help get them in good condition for breeding. The diet is a major factor of all the birds, so I try and make sure that we build them up over the next 2 months ready for the breeding season, and generally it's an increase in protein that starts to spur them on and bring them into breeding condition. You need to make sure you offer it in small amounts, because too much can cause them sort of intestinal problems. Now, I'm offering things like germinated seed, conditioning seed and egg food as a main 3, and I try and mimic a little bit as what they would get in the wild. So with things like the bullfinches and the hawfinches and sometimes the red polls, I am offering them small amounts of fruits that they might come across, like rowan berries for example, in the wild, and that does seem to bring some interest on in them and help them with condition. But particularly it's the main 3 of egg fruit, germinated seed and conditioning seed. I'm only offering that twice a week at the moment in finger drawers or sort of egg food drawers, very similar to this. We've got my egg food recipe is on the channel, and I just have a sort of a general conditioning, a wild seed mix and a germinated seed mix as well. I often get questions about live food. Now, I don't generally just give live food out quite often to the birds unless they are a species that need it. So the only things that are getting live food right now are the hawfinches and the chaffinches. They're getting pinkies and buffaloes. These are all frozen, they're stored in the freezer. I can get them out as soon as I need them, and I only give them a small amount at the moment because they don't expect to come into condition till, of course, April. So I do vary it, and I don't want to give them loads that they won't eat, and of course they'll waste. I do treat crossbills a little bit differently during this period because they are quite different to a lot of other finches. So the first thing I'm doing with them, of course, this is our crossbill mule pair. We've got a 2-bar parrot crossbill hen with a Norwich canary cockbird. They are getting a couple of different things. So I'm giving, for the sake of the canary, the normal things, the germinated seed, conditioned seed and egg food. But for the crossbill, I'm giving her a couple of pine nuts. You can buy them from a normal shop in a very small amount. She's loving those, and they certainly seem to have perked her up a little bit with more interest in breeding. She's getting a couple of live branches and things which she's chewing to bits very, very readily. And I am also sprinkling a little bit of pine pollen on the egg food. So I do imagine that in 6 to 8 weeks' time, she's going to be desperate to go to nest, and we need to make sure she's in good enough condition, but also the Norwich is in fine condition. But so far, he's been singing his head off and she's been feeding him. So they're looking quite a good pair so far, so keep your fingers crossed. Calcium is very important for breeding birds, particularly the hens, of course, because they are making a lot of eggshells out of the calcium that they're taking in, and it does come from their bones as well if they don't have enough. So I am supplementing a little bit of calcium to them at the moment, only in the form of crushed eggshell that goes onto the egg food, or I might put a little bit of grit in there for them as well to build up those calcium stores ready to start laying eggs in 6 to 8 weeks' time. And the final thing, which is a major factor in breeding birds, is light. It controls everything in their lives and the overall cycle of their life. So we need to make sure that light is not going to be a problem. So in my bird room, I've got LED bar lights that shine into all my cages, light everything up in here, but of course they do get a bit of natural daylight through the windows as well. I've got those on timers that follow the natural daylight cycle, so there isn't any problems if a beam goes out or they move outside into a flight, so they go to a different bird room. They're all on the natural daylight hours, and that really does pay off for me. And the way light works on a simple terms is basically it stimulates the pituitary gland, which is in the brain of the birds. It then releases hormones and causes them to sexually mature and bring them into breeding condition. So you need to make sure that's right and isn't going to be a problem. Anyway, everyone, that's it from me for this week's episode from O'Savoury. Now, you might see online that other people are breeding the birds, but don't feel influenced by that. Don't feel that you're behind or you're too far ahead. Different people breed their birds at different times of year by influencing the light, maybe having them on heat, or maybe they're in a different part of the world and they just have a different breeding season completely because of different seasons. So do take that into account. It's not a race. Breed your birds when you feel they're ready to be bred, not when other people are breeding them. But anyway, that's it from me for this week's episode. If you've enjoyed today, make sure to subscribe down below, smash a like on it, and make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for daily updates and behind the scenes footage of all of our birds. Now, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.